Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode of the SpookNotes podcast, where we get academic about everything that goes bump in the night. My name is Marlayna.
And I'm Connor.
And on this episode, we will be talking about Stephen King movies in honor of his 72nd birthday. Happy birthday, Steve!
Yeah, I mean, his birthday happened a few weeks ago. We're a little bit late.
That's right. That's okay. As we usually are.
That's okay. I mean, I think that this is a good time to talk about Stephen King, because there's a lot of Stephen King stuff happening.
That's right. I feel like definitely, more of his works are coming into the limelight, aka like It and Dr. Sleep and those kinds of movies.
And Creepshow that just came out.
And Creepshow, which I think we need to have a solid episode at maybe the end of all the episodes, just to review the series altogether. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Castle Rock, the new season, is also coming out in October. Mm-hmm. It's a good time to be a Stephen King fan. Right. This is the second time we've talked about Stephen King on the podcast.
Yeah, the first episode we did was, I think it was called An Ode to Stephen King.
Well, that we basically did the same thing that we're doing here, which is we kind of do our movie reviews where we talk about the themes and break down a movie. But we did kind of two mini reviews where we each did a movie without telling each other before the podcast what movie we picked.
That's true. And I think last time you might have guessed what mine was, or
last time I did Carrie and you did Misery.
Yeah. And
this time we picked two new movies.
Yes.
We're going to be kind of talking about them again here. So, I don't know, Marlon, do you want to just jump right into it? And
I guess so. So I guess this is a surprise for you to hear what my movie is.
Before you say it, I had two guesses.
Okay.
My guesses are, it's either The Mist or Gerald's Game.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
You're fucking wrong. It's Gerald's Game.
I knew it.
Why did you think so? Like, what hints did I give away?
Well, you said that...
Well, today we were kind of talking about it, and I mentioned sexuality, and you're like, ugh, and then me being the stupid person I was trying to cover it up.
Play it cool.
I'm like, well, like, everything is sexuality. Whatever. But yeah, I guess the cat's out of the bag. I'm doing Gerald's Game.
Okay.
So, I don't know, man. I'm just gonna go kind of right into this shit. All right. Well, to start off, I actually read the book Gerald's Game, I
think this might be the only Stephen King book that you've read that I haven't.
Yes, and I think you should fucking read it. And obviously, we're doing it based on the movie, but it was kind of hard because when I was reviewing the movie, I was also thinking of the book, and I was like, wait, did this happen in the movie or in the book? So I tried to reserve just my thoughts for the movie, but I may touch a little bit about things on the book because they kind of, parallel the movie as well.
I'm going to be doing that for mine.
Okay. So Gerald's Game. It came out in 2017, and it was directed by none other than Mike Flanagan, who also directed some killer productions such as The Haunting of Hill House, Oculus, and he will be directing Dr. Sleep.
He's the Stephen King. He's like the modern.
He's
Stephen
the go-to
King
boy
guy.
for Stephen King. Yeah. So if you haven't seen the movie Gerald's Game, I'm kind of gonna give just a brief synopsis of what happens. So the story is about a woman whose husband dies of a heart attack while she is handcuffed to a bed. And then following the subsequent realization that she is trapped with little hope of rescue, begins to let the voices inside of her head take over. So I guess that kind of just sums it up. Yeah.
Are you going to be talking about the ending and stuff though, like giving spoilers?
I am. So if you haven't really seen this movie or read the book, I highly recommend that you turn this off, go watch it, and then continue with our podcast.
We both really liked the movie.
Yeah. We certainly did. That's why I picked it. I thought it was a good conversation piece. So yeah, if you don't want any spoilers, just turn this off and you guys can figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, this movie was pretty well reviewed. It has a rating of 6.6 out of 10 out of IMDb, 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. and a 77% on Metacritic. So overall, it has a very good rating.
Favorable reviews. I mean, I feel like when it comes to like these ratings, the Rotten Tomatoes one is always feel the most indicative of the overall critical consensus, and I feel like the 91 is makes sense to me.
Sorry, what, the 90s on Rotten Tomatoes?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who works at IMDb or Metacritic, but
Well,
maybe they're just a bunch of prudes that actually don't understand movies.
It's just user reviews.
Well,
it's just everybody on the internet.
Well, that's fucking stupid.
Like, the Rotten Tomatoes is actually critics.
You can't please anybody on the internet. But yeah, as I mentioned before, this movie was actually based on a book that came out, published by none other than Stephen King in 1992. Mm-hmm. And I was actually reading some interesting shit on the internet while I was preparing for this. And King's early novels, they actually had a recurring theme of sacrificial children. Those can be like seen in books or movies like Carrie, or even like The Shining. It. Yeah, exactly. So they're focusing on children that have had something happen to them in the past or in the present, depending when it's filmed. That is definitely going to like impact them as an adult. Mm-hmm. So it's going to have some major consequences and how they're molded into society and into their adult lives. So yeah, that's my kind of like, a bit of a background information about this movie. As we both have said, we both really liked it. Mm-hmm. That's why I picked this movie. But we'll kind of get into more why we individually like it, later on. And obviously, you're not going to be hearing me just talking for, half an hour straight. We're kind of going to, like, chime in on each other's. The way we designed this podcast, this particular episode, we made sure that both of us, we have seen the movie or read the book, or both. Yeah. So we both have some prior knowledge of the pieces that we're going to be talking about.
Mm-hmm. You've not read the book for mine, but you've seen the movie.
Oh, well, I'm reading too many Stephen King books right now.
No, you're not.
When I mean reading, I mean not. And, yeah.
All right.
But whatever. All right, so let's just get right into the nitty-gritty of this. We're going to talk about some themes in the movie Gerald's Game. So one of the major themes that I saw, or that I pointed out, was feminism versus patriarchy.
Okay.
So I find this really interesting because King's representation of feminism is actually very frontlined in this particular movie, whether that be how women feel in society or in marriage. So, like, for instance, Jessie, who's our main character, right off the bat, how she feels in her marriage, she is kind of handcuffed to the bed, so I'm guessing she kind of feels a little bit trapped, feeling a little bit, repressed in her decision makings. And this kind of goes a little bit more in depth in the book about who she is, in society. I'm pretty sure she's a teacher in the book, but she tends to be a stay-at-home mom.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say, is like, you definitely get the idea in the movie because there's mentions of Gerald's work and stuff like that. That he's the breadwinner in the family, and that he's the one who is kind of like, because he mentions like business parties and stuff like that. So I get the idea that he's works in some sort of office or wherever, where it's like kind of like a little bit more of like a boys' room kind of thing, where it's a little bit more machismo. And because he's the breadwinner, he kind of sees himself as the head of the household. Exactly.
So she kind of feels just a little bit repressed in her overall, position in the marriage, in society as well. Like, she's just kind of second to Gerald, or any man figure that's kind of in, I want to say in the book, in the movie. Yeah, I also noted down here that men are always in control in the movie, and they're seen as being the overall decision makers. And I think we touched on that a little bit, but also this kind of goes hand in hand with Jessie being subservient, whatever, you know what I mean, to Gerald, in the sense that he wants to try out this new sexual fantasy thing where he gets a pair of handcuffs her to the bed, so she really doesn't have a lot of say
It's him taking control.
Exactly. This is his fantasy that he wants.
And the fantasy is of him taking control and of taking advantage of her. Because it's almost like a little bit of like a, not a rape fantasy, but like the idea, I believe it's like, I've seen this maybe in a few months, but isn't the idea that he's kind of like, like your husband's not around, he's like a burglar who broke in or something like that?
I was just going to say something like he's the dominant and she's the submissive.
Yeah.
But no, that definitely is a good point. Like, I don't know, maybe some people like that shit. But yeah, I don't know. I thought this paralleled really well to feminism, just because feminism is all about being empowered as a woman. And throughout the course of the movie, Jessie gains strength, as she gains a sense of autonomy. And, I would say by the end of the film, she definitely becomes a little bit more, in control of her life. And I also noted down that, like I just said, she confronts trauma directly. And this can be seen at the end when she's directly talking to the Moonlight Man, which is, I forget his name, Gerard something.
Yeah,
it's some French name, whatever. You guys know who I'm talking about. The Moonlight Man, he looks like the Crypt Keeper, whatever, right? Yeah. It was funny, because when I was doing my research for this movie, I forget what they said, but I was on Google, and they're like, who is the Crypt Keeper in Gerald's game? And I think I laughed. And you were like, what are you laughing about? I'm like, I'll have to tell you in this podcast. But everybody thinks the guy's called the Crypt Keeper.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Like, you mentioned earlier that her entire life, she's kind of been subservient to the male figure in her life. Mm-hmm. And then I think you're right, it isn't until the end when she kind of confronts the Moonlight Man, both in the courtroom, but also when she's leaving the house and she says that, you're not real.
Yeah.
Because that's when she's finally like, she's no longer being afraid of him. Yeah. She is putting herself forward.
Yeah. Well, I also thought like the Moonlight Man is kind of like an allegory for like her father.
Yeah, you could say the same thing about Gerald.
Gerald. So. It's basically he's an allegory for any male figure that has direct control over her. And it's really interesting because, like, the Moonlight Man, he takes things and he collects them. Like, he has this big, I think it's a basket.
Yeah, something like that.
Basket, and then there's bones in it, and there's rings and all that stuff, so he's taking things. So I thought, like, the Moonlight Man, for Jessie, is representative, like, of Gerald and her father, because they take that sense of control away from her, and they keep it for themselves. Moonlight also, just because... he's sorry. My notes are kind of scattered, but like I talked about the Moonlight Man in the sense that he's very dark and he's very hidden, and I thought that was much like the secret she had to keep as a child for when her dad molested her and stuff like that.
I mean, two things I was going to say off of that. Well, one thing, going back to when you said taking things. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, this is the same way that her dad took her innocence from her.
Exactly. Wow, no, that's actually very good.
And as well, the Moonlight, like, when her dad did that, when he, like, masturbated with her on her lap, wasn't that, like, an eclipse or something when, like, the moon was over the sun?
Yep.
So it's, like, that kind of connection.
Yep. You just wait. I touch on that later on.
Okay.
I talk about symbolism and shit. But, yeah, this is, at the end of the movie, she confronts him in the courtroom. It was if she was confronting her father, her husband, and patriarchy all together. And one thing she says in the courtroom that kind of ties it all together is that you're so much smaller than I can remember. And that kind of just goes a little bit full circle that, she felt repressed as a woman, but she worked through it, near-death experience, all this shit, and everything else is not as important as it was. Mm-hmm. She's surpassed all of her fears. She's conquered all of her demons and got beyond that. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. That was one theme I really wanted to touch on is feminism versus patriarchy. I think it's definitely, a relevant theme in this, and for me it was frontline. That was the first thing I thought of. Mm-hmm. Second theme I want to talk about is sexuality. So this is definitely something that is a prominent characteristic throughout Jessie's life. it all kind of started out when she was like a little kid, and as Connor said before, she was at the lake with her dad, and her dad just kind of masturbated. I shouldn't joke about this. Masturbated while she was like on her lap.
You know, I actually have a question about that. I listened to a few different Stephen King podcasts because I'm a nerd. Is that scene different in the book?
Kind of.
Like, is it the same thing, or is it...
It's... Okay, the relationship she has with her dad is, like, a little bit more... Well, obviously it's more detailed in the book, but the relationship she has, it's more connected, because it really, points out that she's a daddy's girl, and not in a weird sexual way, just, like... They both are just really connected to each other. They both are similar. They get along really well. And in the book, she doesn't really get along with her mother. Now, I can't really remember if that was touched on in the movie.
I think it is. It's implied, I believe, in the movie, because you often hear her mother in the background, and you can get the sense that she was more distant from her.
Distant, and also in the book, she was more jealous than anything. Just because Jessie was always with... like the dad, like her husband, that she kind of felt disconnected from him. So, yeah, just the relationship she has with her father is a little bit different.
But the actual act is the same.
Yeah, for the most part. Obviously, it's a little bit more descriptive, and he's trying to downplay it a lot. Whereas I feel like in the movie, it's just like, whoops, here's the dick. Like, I'm gonna whack it off, but whatever. Yeah, so... As I was saying, that this is a prominent characteristic throughout her life, from that moment, it kind of blurred her overall mentality of what was sexually acceptable. And this kind of ties in, when she grows up and when she becomes a woman and when she's with Gerald and stuff. She doesn't really have a good idea of what a healthy sexual relationship is supposed to be, right? Just because, like, Gerald, he kind of turns to extreme ways for sexual pleasure. And I think this goes a little bit more detailed into the book about all the different things that he's tried. I can't remember everything, but it's very violent. It's very dominant. He just wants everything for himself. So,
same thing with that original incident with her dad. I mean, it is like... obviously a very terrible thing, but it's something that he did to her in a bad way, but it's still very self-focused on him.
Exactly.
Because it's masturbation. I mean, that's something you're doing to yourself.
Yeah.
And even though, I mean, it's obviously it's terrible because she's there, but it's like, it's still that idea that she's just an object, and that the pleasure is self-focused on the man and not her.
Exactly. Yeah, and then also I wrote down here that it's being very violent, unnatural, having that sense of disconnectedness, and not loving overall. It's just, like you said, for self-pleasure. But it's kind of weird, because both in the book and the movie, Jessie kind of finds comfort in these sexual actions. That's why she kind of lets Gerald just do what he wants, just because she's so familiar with it, that she's like, well... my daddy loved me, so that's why he did it, so maybe this is love. Like, it's just a whole twisted thing, which is very sad, because, like, it does happen in real life, like, what is it, Stockholm Syndrome?
Yeah.
But that's a little different, but it's very,
but I get
very
what you're
similar.
Saying.
Yeah, so as a result, she's kind of feeling, repressed sexually, but she's not really aware of that. But we are, as the third audience, or whatever, third eye.
Yeah.
Third wall? I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say.
Fourth wall audience. Yeah, I go what you're saying.
Yeah, it's wrong number, wrong concept. But yeah, that's kind of like the overall theme of like sexuality that I thought. Do you have anything to add on that?
I think that I think that even this theme ties back to what you were saying in your first theme about the patriarchy and stuff like that, because sex is a way that males gain dominance over females, like historically, like today and historically. And I mean, I think you do see that in Jessie. I mean, both in Gerald and in her dad, that's how they gain their control over her, is through sex and through sexuality. Because her dad, I think, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because I think it's so clever. I mean, it's terrible, but it's so clever, is that scene afterwards when she's talking to her dad, played by the guy from E.T. and Haunting of Hill House.
Oh, yeah. I know that.
Yeah, when she's talking to her dad, and then he, like, convinces her that she shouldn't tell her mom about what he did because it would be bad for her.
Yeah.
Like, it's, like, very insidious.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one thing that really differs from the book, is that scene in the movie. I don't want to spoil the book for you, but you kind of know what the storyline is.
Yeah.
In the book, her dad is actually very apologetic, and he's just looking for, what is it, like remorse?
Yeah, he's looking for sympathy.
Yeah, sympathy.
Yeah,
like,
but I mean,
he has
still,
remorse for the situation.
But it's still the idea that it's an insidious kind of remorse because it's like...
True, but in the book, he's like, we should tell your mom.
But that's kind of what he does in the movie too, but it's like...
She doesn't want that, so
exactly.
it's playing in her mind and all that stuff. I don't know. In the movie, I think he did a really good job as, being kind of creepy and sinister in the back. And
the writing is also very good in that movie.
Yeah, and it's like kind of realistic.
Well, yeah, in the ways that parents manipulate their children.
Yeah. That's just really fucked up.
Yeah. No, I know.
I don't know. I just remember watching this the first time, and that scene happened, and I was like, oh my god, this is horrible. But that's, I guess, good in a sense that, you get a reaction like that from a horror movie, but it's just the imagery and what it's supposed to represent is just terrible beyond all belief.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I was like, I think that those two themes that you chose were probably the two most prominent ones, and I think that they're more interconnected than one would think at first viewing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have another one. It's not really a theme. It's just like symbolism. I wouldn't really count that as a theme, but things that I can draw themes from in the movie, like certain images and whatever, right? Mm-hmm. One being the handcuffs.
For obvious reasons.
For obvious reasons, feeling trapped. And as we mentioned before, in her marriage, feeling trapped and tied to her childhood trauma, her career, and also just being trapped in one's own mind. I really, really like this movie because it really emphasized an inner monologue throughout the story, which was very interesting for me. Because you don't get that a lot in these movies.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I also think that when talking about how she becomes stronger by the end of the movie, it kind of defeats that patriarchy in a way. Mm-hmm. I think it's clever how it can also be seen in her monologue when she sees those visions or imagines that Gerald is still there. Yeah. By the end of the movie, she does tell him to go screw off. And even though she's really talking to herself, it's just the idea that she beats the concept of Gerald. And also just also because it's herself, it's also self-doubt. She becomes more confident.
Yeah, and that's definitely... I keep going back to the book. I really should stop doing this. But that's one thing that's really, really emphasized in the book. And it's a little bit different because her inner monologue in Stephen King's book is... it's not Gerald. So there's actually two women characters. So you have Good Wife Burning Game, which is Jessie, who's seen as kind of the very doubtful character, all that stuff. And I think that's what Gerald is in the movie, right? He's the one that's doubtful, right?
It's always telling her she can't.
Yeah, exactly. But on the flip side, in the book, the person that's good is actually her friend Ruth. Mm. And also there's another third character. It's small Jessie,
her childhood.
Yeah, so it's all these voices in her head that give her the strength, and then you have Good Wife Burning Game, which is her feeling
her self-doubt.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of one being trapped in one's own's mind. And another thing I was kind of paralleling this to is actually Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart. Have you read the short story, or you know about it, right?
Well, I've read it. I've seen it multiple times.
Wow,
it's pretty well-known story.
Calm down. Yeah, so obviously, he's not mad. He is only nervous because he's committed a crime. So that kind of parallels to Jessie in her own mind. Is that she's not mad that she's seeing all these visions or hearing voices in her head is the fact that she's really just experiencing extreme anxiety and that she needs to get out. So she's looking to find it in herself just to kind of break free and just give it her absolute best.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I thought that was cool that, they're kind of similar, but just in a little bit different way. Another element for symbolism is actually with the planets. So you have like the sun and the moon, and I kind of wanted to go into this. I thought this was really cool. This was actually one of the first things that I wrote.
Isn't this also a thing in the book as well? Like the idea of the constellations or something like that?
Well, it touches on like the phases of the moon. Like it really talks about like the eclipse at the lake.
By the way, I don't know if you know this or if you're going to touch on this, but you know that the book is actually connected to another Stephen King book?
I did know that. I read it. And
Rose Matter?
Yeah.
Do you know how?
The eclipse.
The eclipse, because...
I don't know.
So
I just guessed.
In Gerald's game, when when that thing happens to her, and it's the eclipse or whatever, she's at a lake, right?
Yep.
And is it Castle Lake? Like Castle Rock?
Oh, fuck. I have no
I think it might be. Because in Rose Matter, which was written the year after Gerald's game, the main character is a woman who has a very abusive husband, and she murders her husband. And the moment she murders her husband is the same moment that Jesse is being molested.
Oh, really? Wow.
Because it happens when there's also an eclipse. And basically, I don't know, I think there's a part in the book, in Gerald's game, correct me if I'm wrong, where she's in a well or something, or like she sees a vision of a woman at a well or something.
Yeah.
Because in Rose Matter, the woman murders her husband and throws him down a well.
Oh.
And so that's their connection, and it's she's at the same lake. She's in Rose Matter. She's at Castle Lake.
Well, fuck.
Yeah.
I guess I know what I'm gonna read after my many books. I like it when all things connect, you know? It's nice. It's like a little universe. It's like it's Castle Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so going into depth about the planets. So I said that the sun is a representation of good, and Jesse is actually the representation of the sun in the book and the movie. So the moon, on the other hand, on the contrast to this eclipse that we're going to be creating, is a representation of just anything that's bad, and more specifically, men in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number one being the Moonlight Man.
Mm-hmm.
So he kills individuals and takes a part of them with him, much like Gerald and Jesse's dad. Yeah, so I don't know, just moonlight anything that's like hidden, dark, like, anything that's associated with bad.
Yep.
So yeah, during the solar eclipse, the moon goes in front of the sun, casting a shadow that is seen from Earth. So this is direct symbolism for Jessie feeling overpowered by the many men in her life.
Makes sense to me.
Nice, clean symbolism with the planets. I like that shit. Do you have anything to add about that? Like, I don't know.
But not that about in particular, but I just think that, obviously King in a lot of his works uses the idea of the moon and stuff, or of just like constellations and stars and stuff. Like, and for example, in the Dark Tower series, the world that Roland, the gunslinger, is from is called Midworld, and in that world, you can always tell when the character is in Midworld because there's two moons. Versus. Because the Dark Tower books are kind of like half in like the real world and half in Midworld, and when a character's in the real world, there's only one moon, and then when they go to Midworld, like one of the first things they always notice is that there's two moons.
Wow, Stephen King really likes his constellations, planets, universes. What a nerd!
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, and the last thing I wrote down for symbolism was the dog that eats Gerald's body. So perhaps this is actually a representation of how men in her life have treated her or indirectly made her feel, as if she was, I guess, just being eaten and ripped apart and consumed by others, just especially in a violent way, the way that this dog does it. However, it kind of can go the flip way. So perhaps it goes the other way around, where Jessie is the dog, and she needs to resort to her animalistic ways in order to survive.
Well, I mean, that is how she survives.
I know. So the dog is just doing what is in his nature to survive. So she just has to find it within herself just to be a badass woman.
And cut her hand off.
Cut her hand off, yeah.
De-glove herself.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of just talks a little bit about this movie. Some of the things that I really, thought stood out for me. And now I'm just going to kind of talk about why I like this. Why I like this particular movie and why I chose it. Number one being, it really gave me a claustrophobic feeling, both physically and mentally. I can't even fathom how scary it would be to be in that situation. And that's the thing. It's plausible. It is totally plausible that this could happen. Mm-hmm. And you don't think, like, if I was just handcuffed to a piece of furniture, like, you think it's not that big of a deal. Like, oh yeah, you could probably just move the bed. But no, this thing is heavy that you're attached to. Yeah. Try to drag it across the room. And also just when she's reaching for the glass of water, for something that's so similar to, or simple, that you're reaching out just to grab it, is so hard when you're confined. Things that you need, you can't get right away. And I don't like that. And also, it doesn't really help when you're seeing freaking moonlight people in the house and a dog eat your dead husband. So, yeah, it's fucking scary. Yeah, and also the one scene I can never ever get out of my mind is when she degloves her hand. That may be one of the grossest things I've ever seen, and I remember when I first watched this, and I don't do this a lot, I had to look away because it was gross. Like, ugh. And that's the thing. Again, it could happen. It's not something that, whatever. People get degloved all the time. Maybe not from handcuffs, really, but, like, in other circumstances, it happens. Mm-hmm. It's fucking gross.
Degloving is a thing.
Yeah. I'm all about the gloving. Give me gloves instead. I don't want my hands gone. But, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of everything.
That's Cheryl's game.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question.
Yep.
What do you think? Okay, what do you think about the title of the movie? Do you think that there's any other significance behind the title? The book or the movie?
Oh, Jesus. Gerald's game. That Jessie's just another pawn in
Well, that's what
game.
I was thinking. That, like, I thought that it lessens her.
Yeah.
Like, even though it's a book about her, the book or the movie is titled Gerald's Game. So it's like
she's just a small little fragment in his life.
Exactly. I don't know, that's what I thought.
Nice. Did you like this movie?
Yes, I did. I mean, I thought that I don't think there's obviously ones I like more than others, but I don't think there's been a single Mike Flanagan movie I've seen that I didn't like.
Yeah.
I pretty much like them all.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I am very excited to see Dr. Sleep. I haven't read the book, which is kind of my theme. I don't read books, but when I do, I read the good ones. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, I'm very optimistic for this Dr. Sleep movie, especially since my favorite scary movie of all time is The Shining.
Yes.
So, it'd be nice to see how this story is going to be continued with Danny Torrance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, that was kind of my little piece. It was a little bit longer than I anticipated it being, but yeah.
Do you want to jump into mine?
Yes.
Okay, so for the second part of our Stephen King birthday celebration.
Happy birthday.
We're going to be talking about my movie, which I've not told you. Do you have any guesses of what it might be?
What was this? What did we say? We had to
all we did to decide that we weren't going to be picking the same movie is I just said, are you doing a movie made after 1999?
Okay, so what was your answer?
So mine was before 1999.
Oh, shit. Listen, I'm in no mood to guess. Just tell me.
We're going to be talking about, for my half, 1983's The Dead Zone, starring Christopher Walken.
Okay, I was almost going to say Cujo, because I looked at his screen just now, and there was a small thing at the top, and it said 1983.
Well, funny enough, The Dead Zone and Cujo both came out in the same year.
Wow.
And Christine also came out in 1983.
Oh my God, it's a big year.
It was a big year for Stephen King. That was actually the first year in history that more than one Stephen King movie came out in the same year.
Wow.
And it was 3 movies.
And 2019 is doing the exact same thing.
Pretty much. Well, I mean, we are kind of in a Stephen King renaissance now.
A little bit.
Yeah, so we're talking about The Dead Zone.
Cool.
You've seen this movie?
I think so. We do live very close.
Well, I'll talk about that.
I haven't read the book.
You haven't read the book. I've read the book. You've only seen it once, right?
No, I think twice.
Really? I've seen this movie at least 3 times. I really like it.
Wow.
It's probably one of my top 5 favorite Stephen King movies. And I'll get into
that. Okay.
Okay, so The Dead Zone. It's about a guy named Johnny Smith.
Johnny, which is played by
Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken.
So Johnny Smith gets into a coma because of a car accident where he slams into a milk truck. He awakens from the coma. And he finds out that 5 years have passed. He also finds out that he has psychic abilities where if he touches somebody, he can see their future, he can see their present, and he can see their past. Another aspect of Johnny's story is the fact that he has a girlfriend before his coma that he says he wants to marry. He tells her he wants to marry her. And after the coma, he wakens after 5 years, and he finds out that she has moved on. She has married somebody else and has kids with them. So it's kind of like this heartbroken thing. So basically, the movie's about Johnny. He goes on a series of adventures, not just one, where he has to use his psychic abilities and decide how he wants to either help people or kind of move away from the world. Mm-hmm. It's very much a tragic kind of.
It's almost like he's feeling forgotten, right?
Yes,
it's
I
like
think
5 years have gone, like things have moved on, and he's just.
Well, that's the thing is that I'll get into it a little bit more. But one of my favorite things about this movie is that at the end of the day, it's a movie about a guy with psychic powers. But the real crux of the story is just about this guy who is living in a world that has moved on from him, that has kind of forgotten him, and it's such a bittersweet movie. And the book really captures that as well. I absolutely love it. Nice. So that's The Dead Zone. That's what it's about. So what did others think about it when it first came out? Well, it has a 7.4 on IMDb, better than Gerald's Game.
Which is weird.
It has a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is that the exact same that Gerald's Game has? 91%?
Let's see.
You have it in your notes there.
Yes, it is.
Wow, the exact same. So
wow.
And it got a 3.5 out of 4 from Roger Ebert. So the movie was very well received when it first came out. At the time, many of the top critics considered it Stephen King's best movie, and that this is comparing it to things like Carrie, The Shining, and others.
Yeah.
Salem's Lot. One of the things that a lot of the critics touched on at the time, and people still talk about, is that one of the best parts of this movie was the acting from both Christopher Walken and the rest of the cast was seen as very believable performances and kind of added to the, like I said, the tragic love story aspect of it. So, background information. So this movie was released in 1983. It was actually released in October around Halloween. Wow. Even though, I don't really think that this movie is a true bread and butter horror movie. I think it has aspects of horror, but I think that it's more so a drama, a human drama.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I like about it. As we already mentioned, it was released in the same year as Cujo and Christine. The cast included other famous actors like Brooke Adams as Sarah, Martin Sheen as the evil politician Greg Stilson, and Tom Skerritt from Alien as the sheriff. Another thing that obviously that's very important about this movie, and there's another reason why I really love it, is it was directed by the great David Cronenberg, the greatest Canadian director of all time, in my opinion. This was his 9th film, and it was also the first one that was kind of like a big budget Hollywood movie. He'd never done that before. Most of his movies had been smaller, kind of independent movies, and it was also the first movie that he didn't write by himself. He had somebody else help him write it.
And also, this is just a little bit different than his normal style.
It is, yeah. I would definitely agree with that.
Less gory.
Yes,
right.
which is his normal style. Yeah. He's all about body horror, which I think that this actually does have some aspects of body horror. I think about the scene where the serial killer deputy kills himself.
Yeah, but not as in depth as like any other movies
No.
that he does.
This came out a year before The Fly, which is kind of like his masterpiece, many people would consider. So I said that this was his first kind of big budget Hollywood movie, but despite that, he still said he wouldn't direct the movie if he couldn't shoot it in Canada. And this is where I come to the part where I explain that another reason that me and Marlena really, really love this movie is because it was basically shot around where we live.
Yeah.
It was made basically all in the Niagara region in Canada, which is where we come from, except for one notable exception. Do you know what that exception is?
The city?
Nope.
I don't know.
There's a scene very early on in the movie, before Johnny gets into the coma, where he and Sarah go to a roller coaster, and that was filmed in
Vaughan?
Canada's Wonderland. Yeah.
Holy shit, really?
Yep.
Oh my god, now I have to rewatch this movie.
Yeah, so, but yeah, like I said, other than that, it was all in Niagara region. A few notable locations are the Screaming Tunnel, which was used in the scene where the sheriff takes Johnny to kind of try to figure out where the killer might be.
Which, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, is actually haunted.
Yes, well that's what I was going to say. It's reported to be actually haunted in real life. Other important kind of landmarks are the lakeside gazebo, where Johnny figures out who is the killer. So that actually gazebo was constructed by David Cronenberg and his crew for the movie, and then the town basically just said, you can just leave it there, we're just going to keep it.
Which, it does look very nice.
It's still there today.
You see Lake Ontario, you see the States. Yeah, it's very nice. Gazebo.
And like I said, a lot of other Niagara on the Lake locations can be seen, like the courthouse. The house that he lives is right across from one of the biggest hotels, Prince of Wales, in Niagara on the Lake. So yeah. So after the film came out, King said that he was actually very happy with the film, and he said that kind of the changes to his script were positive ones that he thought made the narrative better overall.
Yeah.
So some of the main changes between the movie and the book, even though the movie actually does a pretty good job of being similar to the book, is that the part of the movie where Johnny is tutoring his student, there's a lot more time spent with that subplot, and Johnny actually lives with his student. So that part's more. There's more background with Greg Stilson. And there's actually a subplot where Johnny's mother is kind of like this religious fanatic who almost joins a cult.
Oh, Jesus. So it's very different then.
It's pretty different. But a lot of it is still the same. One thing that I thought was interesting is that when the movie was being made, Stephen King, you know who he wanted to play Johnny? Bill Murray. He's like, I want Bill Murray to play Johnny.
I could not. Bill Murray is a fucking comedian.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think Christopher Walken does a good job.
I mean, if they want to remake that, that'd be pretty funny, but...
One thing that I didn't know until I was doing this research is, do you know who produced this movie? Deborah Hill.
Oh my God, why am I blanking?
Deborah Hill is the same woman who helped co-create the original Halloween with John Carpenter.
Oh, feck. Oh my God.
She was married to John Carpenter.
Really?
For a while before he married Adrienne Barbeau.
Wow.
Yeah, she produced this movie.
Jesus.
Yeah. So that's a little Halloween connection for you.
Wow. A little Easter egg for you freaks.
And then finally, one other interesting fact is that, did you know that there's actually a Dead Zone TV show that aired in the early 2000s?
I think I heard about that, actually.
And well, basically, the idea for the Dead Zone TV show came from the fact that the writer of this movie, not David Cronenberg, said that he kind of wrote it almost in an episodic fashion. Because that's the way the book and the movie kind of is that, like, it's almost like different episodes. Like, here's Johnny and the serial killer part of it. Here's Johnny and, like, the student who he has to save. Here's Johnny and the politician.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of almost...
I think that makes a little bit better sense because obviously I like the movie, but it was a little jumpy. It was a little all over the place, kind of.
Well, that's the same
And it tended to focus on just a few things.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. It is kind of like a TV show in that aspect, and that Johnny is kind of like the central character who carries you through, but all like the storylines are all different and stuff.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to get into the themes. So I identified basically two main big themes that I wanted to talk about with you.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
I don't know.
Okay, so the first one, and I think you're going to laugh because I talk about this kind of stuff all the time, but the idea of Johnny as a tragic Shakespearean hero, akin to Hamlet. I think that there's...
Oh, here we go.
I think that this movie actually is almost parallel to Hamlet. And
Guys, you should see Connor right now. His smile, he almost looks a little bit crazy. He's like, whoa!
The plot of this movie and the character of Johnny reflect Hamlet pretty well. And I think that this is kind of Stephen King doing a Shakespearean tragedy. Because Johnny is a very tragic character.
A little bit.
Oh, yeah, so... Ghost.
Sorry, guys. We heard somebody slam their door in our apartment, and we thought it was a ghost.
Okay, yeah. So first off, right off the bat, the idea of that Johnny is kind of like the man in black. Johnny and Hamlet are both figures who wear lots of black, and kind of their classic image is them wearing kind of a black cloak or a black coat. Johnny and Hamlet both do this, and this is both comes from a sense of mourning. Hamlet, who's mourning the death of his father, obviously, and Johnny, who's kind of mourning the loss, like his loss of the years he's missed while he's been in his coma, and the idea that it's kind of something that was taken away from him. Without his control, kind of the same way Hamlet's father was taken away from him early before, like he should have, right? So kind of the idea of the man in black who has experienced loss, and both Johnny and Hamlet kind of want to get away from the world. Because one thing that we don't often think about, but in the beginning of Hamlet, in the very first act, he actually asks Claudius if he can leave Denmark and go back to like his studies, because this is before he talks to the ghost of his dad, and before he's tasked with killing Claudius. He just kind of wants to leave and just like kind of be left alone. Okay. And it's the same way that Johnny kind of wants to kind of retreat from the world after he's lost so much. Like, because really, even though he has these powers, which he does use to help people, a lot of people naturally fear him and stuff, and they're kind of afraid of those powers. And so he just kind of wants to live his own life and just kind of separate from the world that hates and fears him. So kind of like the same thing with Hamlet.
That's actually very sad when you put it like that.
Yeah, but it's actually due to both Hamlet's case and Johnny's, it's due to supernatural forces that he is tasked with killing an evil political leader.
Holy shit. This is Hamlet, guys.
And so, okay, keep this in mind. So, both Johnny and Hamlet, keep this in mind. So, due to supernatural forces out of their control, they're tasked with killing an evil political leader. And that in both cases, they're seen as a madman for doing it, even though they both know that they're doing the right thing.
Oh my god.
And they're doing what needs to be done. And they also both deliberate over the decision heavily. Obviously, Hamlet, and the most of the play is him deciding whether he should or shouldn't kill Claudius after his ghost dad tells him to. And in Johnny's case, there's the scene in the movie where he talks to his doctor, and he says to his doctor, like, the idea of, like, if you could go back in time, would you kill Hitler? Knowing that you would die, but you would save all those other lives. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the same thing. Like, do you or do you not kill this person, even though you know it's the right thing to do, even if though it will be in like personal loss to yourself. To
kill or not to kill? That is the question.
And of course, both Johnny and Hamlet are successful in killing their enemy, and they both die immediately afterwards.
Yeah. Wow! Twilight Zone.
I think that...
No, that's pretty good, actually.
I think that the difference between Johnny and Hamlet, and this is a key difference, and this is where the Stephen King kind of twist of it comes in, is that Hamlet is trying to get revenge for past sins, mm-hmm. and to kind of correct the current state of Denmark.
Yeah.
Whereas Johnny is trying to prevent things that have yet to come. See, that's where the Stephen King part of it comes into, where it's like he has seen something that he knows will happen, which is that Greg Stilson will become president and kind of start a nuclear apocalypse.
Yeah.
So he's kind of trying to prevent things that have yet to come, versus Hamlet is trying to, get revenge for past sins.
I never would have thought about the movie The Dead Zone in that, Shakespearean lens. Thank you for saying that. That's actually very interesting.
And then at the end of both stories, both Johnny and Hamlet die knowing that they can never have the love of their lives, even though they have succeeded in their tasks.
So romantic.
Well, that's the thing is that...
I think Stephen King is a real softie.
The Dead Zone is a very romantic movie and book, and my favorite scene in both the movie and the book is one that you actually wouldn't expect. In both the movie and the book, there's a scene where Sarah comes to Johnny's house, and it's during the Christmas time, and Johnny's dad is away at first, and then with her baby. She comes with her baby, and they kind of put the baby for a nap, and then her and Johnny have sex, because it's kind of like the idea of like what we missed for, if it wasn't for the coma, this is what we would have had.
Yeah.
And then there's a really beautiful scene after that where basically his dad comes home, and then like they kind of have a dinner, and it's kind of like a Christmas dinner, and like the baby's there at the table, and it's the idea of like, this is the family that never was, that we could have had.
Stop! You're pulling my heartstrings. I don't like this.
Both in the movie and the book, like there's a scene where Johnny's dad is playing with the little baby, and it's like, this is like the grandson that he never had.
Oh my God.
It's like what could have been. And it's like, and then it's like the idea that Sarah really never comes back to Johnny because, this was their one night to like make things right and make up for lost time, but it's something that they still can't ever have.
I feel very bummed.
Well, I mean, that's why it's a tragedy, right? It's bittersweet because it's very romantic, and you can tell that these two characters really love each other.
Have it
but they can't. But it's not really a feasible thing. Yeah. So, anyways, going back to the Johnny Smith equals Hamlet idea, both Johnny and Hamlet have a small group of friends that they kind of go for advice and who they trust. Mm-hmm. And then also, both Claudius in Hamlet and Stilson in the Dead Zone have trusted advisors that work against the hero. In Stilson's case, it's his bodyguard, and in Claudius's case, it's his advisor, Ophelia's dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were looking to me.
No, those are just
to point out his name. I'm like, if anybody knows Shakespeare, it's you.
No, those are just other similarities that I thought about.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of the one major theme that I thought about, the Shakespearean aspect of it.
Very nice.
And then so the other major theme is the political allegory that you can see in the movie. So at the time that this was written, this was actually written in the 70s, but didn't come out until the 80s. Obviously, this person didn't exist in this light yet, but I think it's still... This is why the beauty of media, because media can take on different meanings as years go on. And I think the Dead Zone is a perfect example of it, because I think we can see Greg Stilson as a perfect analog for Trump.
And Doug Ford.
Not as much.
I know,
Trump.
not as extreme. Okay, yeah.
So obviously, like, the political aspects of this book are very important ones. The whole last act deals with an evil political character in Greg Stilson. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I thought that Greg Stilson is kind of an analog for Trump, even though, again, obviously, Stephen King didn't mean for this to happen because Trump wasn't around as a political figure yet.
Bro, I swear to God, Stephen King is an oracle. Okay, so he predicted this shit, and then also, what book are you reading? Needful Things?
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't he predict the Patriot, like the New England Patriots?
Well, there's just a line where he says that the Patriots, because the Needful Things was written in 1991, when the Patriots sucked. And there's a line where it said, yeah, they're bound to win one eventually.
Little did they know, the fucking Patriots, undefeated champs of football.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But anyways, so yeah, Greg Stilson equals Donald Trump. So both of these characters, I mean, Donald Trump's not a character, he's a real person, unfortunately, are political candidates that during their election, most, like, smart people, most, like, academics, like, most white-collar people really laughed at. Like, you see this in the movie, like, Johnny's, the student that he tutors, his dad there's a scene where they sit down on the couch and watch Greg Stilson at a rally, and he's kind of laughing at him, and he calls him a clown, and he says like he just does stupid stuff to get attention and to appeal to the masses, but there's no way he would ever get elected.
Oh
Which
my
is the exact same thing that
God.
Donald Trump did. That people said like, he would do like things at his like rallies, like he would like I
Be
don't
the
know,
most
make
racist.
racist, like he
Yeah.
would like make funny noises and stuff, and he would do silly shit on stage, and people laugh at him. And people were like, well, there's no way people would ever vote for this guy.
Yeah.
And
Jeez.
then of course it comes
Here
true.
we are, guys.
They both do absurd things on the stage, and despite that absurdity, they gain a massive following. Like in the book and in the movie, Stilson, like every time he's on stage to talk, he wears like a hard hat and like he does like push-ups and shit, and he runs around on stage. And like just like Trump is always like kind of being like, oh, I'm the best, yeah, look at me, and just stuff like that. Both Stilson and Trump are not from a traditionally political background. So Trump is obviously a real estate guy. Like he's in real estate, he owns property and stuff like that. And Stilson in the book, actually, the first time you ever meet Stilson is when he's like a young, like maybe like a late teenager, early 20s, and he's actually a door-to-door Bible salesman. He sells Bibles, and the very first time you meet him, you don't even really know who he is yet in the book, but he goes to this farm to try to sell them a Bible, but there's nobody there, and then the dog is just like annoying him, and the dog actually almost bites his leg, and then Greg Stilson kicks the dog to death,
Jesus.
and then leaves.
Oh my God. That's awful.
So yeah, so both Stilson and Trump are not really from traditionally political backgrounds, but they both rise through the ranks of politics very quickly. I mean, again, this is not, he didn't say this at the time, but recently King has even said that Stilson is very similar to Trump, and that when he first wrote Stilson, he never imagined any political figure that could be this crazy until Trump came around. And then, as well, both Stilson and Trump have threatened political violence and have called themselves, or sorry, not political violence, nuclear violence.
Yeah.
And both have called themselves the voice of the people.
You know, it's so eerie.
Like, literally, there's a
hear all
line in the
this.
movie where Stilson says that he's the voice of the people, and that's something that Donald Trump has said, that he's the voice of the people.
Dude, he probably watched this movie and was like, oh my God, it worked for him. Maybe I should do the same thing.
And then one kind of final, so that's basically the political analog that Stilson is Trump. Like, it's just eerie.
Cool.
Yeah. And then one kind of thing I noted as kind of like an overall question of the movie, that overall kind of overarching theme of it, or like I said, question, is just about the idea of like, if you had the power to do something to prevent something that you know is happening, like, would you do it? Like obviously from a moralistic standpoint you would, but it's about actually like taking that action and doing it. And it's about like, would you, and it's like, you know what it is? It's the Harry Potter line where Dumbledore says, and this is one of my favorite lines of all time. Do you know what I'm about to say? It's in the fourth movie after Voldemort comes back, and Dumbledore says, pretty soon everybody's gonna have to make a choice between doing what is right and doing what is easy.
Yeah, dude, that's my motivational quote. I love it.
Because really, it's not about like, obviously everybody would want to be doing the right thing if you had this power that Johnny Smith has, but it's like, are you actually going to go through with that, or are you just going to take the easy way out? Because Johnny Smith, really, he knows that if he tries to kill Stilson, he will die, because obviously Stilson has bodyguards who also have guns. So it's not about saving himself and everybody else, it's knowing that he's going to die, but he would prevent this terrible thing from happening. And Stilson and Johnny Smith does the right thing instead of the easy thing.
Well, based on how well you know me, what do you think I would do?
I think you would do the right thing.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer, guys. Like, don't do what's easy. You gotta work hard, you gotta do the right thing.
Yeah, so those are kind of the themes
Cool.
that I thought about. Some of the main fears that I kind of got out of this movie is just kind of like the fear of loss. Both actual loss because Johnny loses his mom. His mom dies. And kind of like the loss of, loved ones, in the sense that, losing somebody that you love because you couldn't be with them. And Johnny does, obviously that happens because of his coma. The whole kind of Rip Van Winkle thing of the world moving on without you.
Yeah.
Like, Rip Van Winkle goes to sleep and then wakes up years later. The same thing happens with Johnny Smith. The fear of political leaders who are out of control, like that's the same with Greg Stillson. And a very real fear is the fear of human contact, because Johnny's powers only happen when he touches somebody. So it's the idea that he doesn't want to touch anybody because he doesn't want to see those visions, because he doesn't want to like have to be burdened with that responsibility.
That's true.
And the only reason he finds that thing about Greg Stillson is because he's at a rally because Sarah's there.
Yeah.
And Greg Stillson's obviously he's a political guy. He's shaking everybody's hand, and then he accidentally shakes Johnny's hand, and then Johnny has that vision.
Oh my god, that'd be awful.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you know what? This is actually like a hidden gem. I would have never thought that. Okay, like when you dissect this movie and all this stuff, like it's more interesting than it first appears. Like, I'm gonna be completely honest. I like this movie. It was one of my favorites. But now, when you're dissecting it, like I want to go back and watch it just with a different lens.
Yeah, it's really good, and I guess that leads me into kind of my opinion. But like, it really is one of my favorite Stephen King movies, because it is a horror movie, and obviously, this is a horror podcast, we're big fans of horror, but at the end of the day, it's more so just like a human story.
Yeah.
You're following Johnny as a character, and you're kind of going through his journey, going through his loss, and you respect him because he always tries to do the right thing, but you still feel sorry for him because you know he can never really be happy, and he's kind of, again, like I said, this tragic figure, which is why I really love it. I also love it for other simpler reasons. The Canadian kind of connection makes me really like it.
Yeah.
The fact that I've literally been at these places many, many times.
We're literally 20 minutes away.
The fact that it's also kind of like, I said in the same vein as Creepshow, it's kind of like a combination of some of my favorite people in horror. Like, Creepshow is obviously George Romero and Stephen King. This is David Cronenberg and Stephen King.
Wow.
Like, I really like that connection as well. But, it's just really one of my favorites, and if you haven't seen it, I really, really highly recommend it. I think that it's a very different Stephen King movie from what you would expect, and it's also one of my favorite books as well. It's probably my third favorite Stephen King book of all time, after Pet Sematary and It.
Cool.
So yeah, that's The Dead Zone.
Wow. I feel like I learned so much.
Yeah.
I hope you guys learned stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. And again, happy birthday to Stephen King.
Yeah, well, happy belated birthday.
Happy belated birthday.
But I'm sure he appreciates it nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so,
that's the podcast.
Yeah, that's it. Hopefully we didn't bore you guys into sleep too much. Yeah, I guess we'll just make this quick and easy.
Yeah, we'll just sign off. So you can find us on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes, all under the handle SpookNotes.
That's right. If you have any questions, comments, or hopefully no concerns, you can send us an email at spooknotes@gmail.com. We're always interested in hearing what you guys think. If you have any, if you have seen these movies, feel free to drop a comment of what you think. If there's any other themes that stuck out in your mind, or any just future recommendations that you'd like us to talk about for the podcast, or any ideas, or just talk to us, please.
What is your favorite Stephen King movie?
Exactly. What is your favorite Stephen King movie? Blah, 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 blah. So yeah, as always, don't forget to cite the Spook Notes.